So just 5:59, we've been on here for 14 more minutes besides now, just to give people time to log on. Right now, it is only myself, Jeremy Clancy. I'm with Applied and Approved Permits, and Brian Hodgson, the owner of 441 Shady Lane, Pasadena, Maryland, 21122. We're gonna kind of just keep doing a little bit of small talk for just a few minutes to see if we get anybody else join. But as of right now, there's nobody on the participant screen. If by 6:02, 6:03, nobody still has joined, we'll just get into it and go through the entire meeting.
Yeah, because you still have to go through the process, the explanation, everything.
The whole thing. Yep.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I'll show us a bunch of stuff on the shared screen. The county does a good job actually on their community meeting process and policy and flow chart of what they break it up into 3 sections. They call it everything you have to do before the meeting, everything you have to do during the meeting, and everything you have to do after the meeting. And they're fairly extensive.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So it's a lot of stuff, but it lays it out pretty well. So it'll actually make the meeting kind of flow. Hopefully it won't take up too much of your time tonight. If anybody joins and they have a bunch of questions, it might go a little longer, but
yeah, that's fine.
Usually we can get through these things in like 35, 40 minutes ish.
Oh, okay, sounds good.
And go forward. But yeah, so for right now, let's just give them a few more minutes.
Yeah, that's your call.
Yeah. I'm gonna watch my computer clock because it says 6:01.
Okay.
I always also, just so you know, so the meeting obviously is being recorded. It's on Zoom so that everybody can join. It's a platform that they don't need to download any software, which the county requires. But just in case Zoom does not record it properly or we have a digital error, I have a secondary camera that I record the whole thing so that we don't have to have another meeting just because of the digital problems.
Yeah, good.
You need me to look back and make sure that my thing is still running. That's why I'm doing that.
Right.
I kind of try to cover all bases because
yeah, I appreciate that.
Especially because you wouldn't be able to just have it again like tomorrow night. You'd have to.
No, because you'd have to put notice out again, wouldn't you? Yeah.
Yep. We actually, just for your own knowledge, especially since those letters went out and we had that hiccup with the first round of notification for the meeting, we have just so you know, we have the exact same thing on the back end. After tomorrow, when I post this to the county and it starts, once they put it up on their website, it starts a 14-day comment period. At 28 days from now, so that we ensure that the full 14 days has gone by, I have to send letters again to everybody that was on that list with the minutes of tonight's meeting and any comments that happened from the meeting or in the 14-day post comment period. They'll go out to the same list of people that got the meeting notice.
Okay.
So another round of envelopes will go out.
Will I get a copy of that?
Sure. Yeah, I'll send you that.
Because I didn't get the first letter.
Yeah, you have to come, so you don't have to do the meeting notice. But all right, well, I say I'm going to keep my eye. I'm going to, like I said, if you see me keep looking over to the right because I'm just watching the participant screen just to make sure nobody's having trouble getting in. But it's 6:03, so at this point, the 15 pre 6 o'clock and the 3 after kind of gave at least 18 minutes for people to jump on. And if anybody jumps on from this point on, I'll try to catch them up to where we are. But I'm just going to start going through our list so that we can get you in and get you done.
Okay.
Good. All right. So during the community, let's just say again, one of the things it does not say on the list, believe it or not, is just which we also had with the meeting notice, is to even give the address and at the very beginning. So say it again. This project is a modification to the steep slopes and the buffer for an open deck project that's going to be at 441 Shady Lane, Pasadena, Maryland, 21122. I'm going to just read through these bullet points just to make sure that I say them for the record. So during the meeting, it wants me to schedule the virtual meeting so that it opens 10 to 15 minutes prior to the advertised time to start. We did that. We've actually been on here since then. I just didn't start the recording until a minute before the start time. At the opening of the virtual meeting, we must announce to the meeting attendees that this is being recorded. I've let you know. If anybody pops on, I will let them know that it's being recorded. Must use a virtual platform that allows for recording, and the county only accepts a single video URL link. I'm paraphrasing some of this stuff for you, but the I've done this many times now on Zoom since COVID started, and this one works pretty good. I like this one too because I don't have to actually put some sort of software on their computer. Spend a couple of minutes at the beginning just laying the ground rules for asking questions or how anybody wants to use the software. If somebody pops on, we'll let them know. To be honest with you, I'm pretty lackadaisical with that. If they want to just jump in and interrupt me, and then we'll stop and talk about whatever they want to talk about. But right now, it's only you. So you, by all means, feel free to jump in and interrupt me anytime you'd like.
That probably won't happen.
Okay. Obviously, number 5, I have to generate a list of participants, including name and affiliation, anybody that joins. Me and you actually will be listed in that because we are here. So that will go in the post-meeting notification envelopes. Then it goes into a number 6, their own experience of suggesting best practices for virtual meetings. If we do this often, it just goes into common stuff that, you know, maybe have one person watch the screen while the other person goes through all the stuff. We don't have to do that. It's a pretty straightforward modification request. I can do both. It also says that maybe if we had imagine if we had 10 or 15 people join the meeting and you had a lot of people calling out at once, it recommends to limit people to the chat function so that we can call on people one by one. Again, unless you have 10 or 15 people show up, I don't think we're going to need to do that. But if we get to that point, I'll go through that stuff with everybody.
Okay.
Okay, and now number 7. So this is where I'm going to switch paperwork because it says at a minimum, information identified on the revised community meeting checklist form must be clearly addressed in each virtual presentation. So I'm going to take a departure from their instructions, grab this checklist form. This is actually something that is a deliverable to the county. It'll get turned in when we're said and done at the end of the modification process. Once we go through everything on this checklist, I'll jump back into this to close it out and we'll be done. But this is pretty much the meat and potatoes of what we have to go through. And I am just find it personally best practice that I physically check off the checklist as I go. So, all right. Explanation of the regulatory requirements of section 17-2-107 of the county code and why the community meeting is being held. So I like the second part first. Why the community meeting is being held is because we need to apply, or if we have applied and we need to obtain a modification. I am going to pull up this and see if I can share my screen. Are you seeing plans right now?
Yes, I'm seeing the first page of the
Yep.
deck and fence.
All right, let me switch over to this one. And how about a bunch of words?
Yep, there it is.
Okay, so this is the actual county comments. So it's easiest to explain the modification just by looking at the county comments. We'll get later, I'll go back into where you start seeing the variance language, because that's something that actually comes at the end of the checklist. The important thing, or the thing that why we need this meeting right now is, I don't know if my cursor shows up, but in the middle where it starts talking, okay, perfect. Where it talks about the modification. It says the proposed construction will occur within slopes of 15% or greater, or their required buffer. Accordingly, a steep slope modification is required. Prior to approval of the building permit, it will be required that you obtain a modification to steep slope and buffer disturbance per 17.6403 and 17.8201B. It says IDA. We're going to return to that in a little bit. You will also be required to have a community meeting per 17-2-107. So bottom line is we're proposing to construct a 12-foot by 38 feet 4 inch, I believe, which we'll pull up plans here in a little bit. Open deck. It's an open deck structure that does have steps to the ground, but the steps are actually within that footprint. And that open deck, though on flat land in reality, does come or is constructed within that area that they're speaking of the steep slopes and its buffer. The buffer, so that it's said out loud, is when you get to the top of a steep slopes of whatever that percentage or greater is, once you get to the top slope, you still have a 50-foot from that back expanded buffer, which goes well into the footprint of the existing house. So any construction in that area would require the modification because of being within the expanded buffer. So even though there's one little part, which you'll see on the topo map, I'll pull up a little later, that does go within what they consider a steep slope. Again, real life, the ground is flat, but where it's mapped as a steep slope, it wouldn't even matter if you didn't because of the 50-foot expanded buffer. We would have needed to do this regardless. Now, the first part of that bullet explained the regulatory requirements of 17.2.107. So since we need a modification, as it says there in the comments, we need a community meeting. This is actually 17.2.107 from the Anne Arundel County Code. I implore anybody that would like to read it can read it, yourself included. I can even email it to you. It's pretty straightforward. It says what this section applies to and what it does not apply to. It does apply to your residential project, and which would be 1 dot sub parenthetical 1 right there, or Roman numeral I. It says a modification to permit direct impact to environmentally sensitive areas. That's the steep slopes. You continue down that county code, it goes into when meetings are then required. Believe it or not, this section that says meetings are being required doesn't directly address your project at all. But because of the environmentally sensitive area, you do need the meeting, as the comments say, and then it goes into the notice of the 28 days for the county, 21 days for the community. And normally these meetings are held in person, but I want to, for record, pull up that before they rescinded it, they did put out this Office of Planning and Zoning 20-11-REV or revised, which came at the heels of COVID, that allowed these meetings to cease being done in person and now being done virtually, which is what has required kind of this extensive setup that we're doing tonight. But I put all of these on here again for record only. It's interesting to note that on August 12th, they rescinded this order. Our request went in the week prior to that. So any community meeting from September 12th on will go back to being in person, but tonight's September 7th. So we got in just under the gun for this. So that is the regulatory requirements of 107 in the county code and why this is even being required. Because that was long, let me stop sharing for a moment so I can check our participant box, and there's still nobody. So let's move on. Name and location of the project. So it's the owners of record are Brian and Deborah Hodgson, Hodgson. I have that right?
Yes.
Okay. And location again is 441 Shady Lane, Pasadena, 21122. Specifically, this is going to be on what the county considers the front, believe it or not, because it's a waterfront lot. But it's
You're breaking up a little bit, Jeremy.
How about now? Any better
That's
at all?
good.
My hand was in front of it, so I'm glad you told me that. If I do that again, let me know.
Okay.
This is actually considered the front. The deck is technically considered on the front because it's a waterfront lot, but it is the physical rear of the house. But because of that, when we get to the variance, we're going to need 2 signs. I'll explain that. Okay, whether or not the project is public capital improvement project or privately proposed project. This is a private residence. So this is a privately proposed project. Existing and proposed ownership of the land. Is it public, private, or a combination? Again, private residence, completely private ownership. All right, zoning of the property. I'm gonna share the screen again because this is better to see than me just say. Let's see. All right, you're seeing a colored map right now, kind of weird lines. Okay,
Yes.
good. This is, I got a bunch of maps directly from GIS and mapping on the 4th floor at Anne Arundel. This is a zoning map. The polygon shaped lot that has the blue flag in it is the one we are talking about, 441 Shady Lane. And there is a small corner where it's not homogeneous zoning all the way through. There is a small corner that has a different zone. This green color, that's the bulk of the map, is actually RLD. Yes, RLD zoning, but that one little corner of the property is actually considered OS, or open space property. Doesn't change anything, but I said when I looked at those comments that, you know, but they were talking about critical area designation and they only listed IDA. it's technically a misnomer, just to clear it up for the record, that we have 2 zones and we actually have 2 critical area designations. So for this part, I want to just point out that there's 2 zones. We are not planning any construction. It's not even close, actually, to the open space zone. So where the construction is proposed, it is in the RLD part of the lot. All right. Whether or not the property is in critical area, and if it is in the critical area designation. It is critical area, it's waterfront, so clearly critical. And I wanted to show this map because it too shows that there's 2 different designations. So the yellow, or the bulk of the lot, again, we're talking about the one with the blue flag, is LDA, or limited development area. And this corner, that is the green color, actually is RCA, or resource conservation area. Now, just to switch real quick for recording purposes, I want to show the site plan, since we keep talking about this polygon. So the left side of this, can you see the site plan, Mr. Hodges?
Yes, I can.
Okay. The left side of this site plan shows the entire lot. But because of it's a larger lot, we lose a lot of the detail at that scale. So the right side is a blow up of the area that we're talking about. If you look here, where this line is dotted, we actually showed on the site plan where the zoning changes. And then this line with the red tracers, I know it's probably hard to see on the computer screen, but these are 11 by 17 prints, and the county gets 9 of these for the variance. This is the delineation line for the 2 different critical area designations, the RCA and the LDA. So the blue area shows the proposed open deck attached to the existing structure. And because of this, you can see that the deck is both on this side of the zoning line, so RLD, and this side of the critical area line, so it's in the LDA, not the RCA.
Okay.
All right. Let me check our participants again. And nope, we're still good. It's just the 2 of us. All right, number 7, location of all environmental features on the site as listed in the sketch plan and preliminary plan checklist, and whether those features were taken from mapped resources or were field delineated. So that's a big, long sentence, and I'm going to do both. So let's come back to our page. I actually did this in 2 ways. So this is the topography map. Often, just permit vernacular, it is shortened to topo map. It's just showing topography lines. If you're not familiar, or for the record, the lines, every line is a contour of a rise over raise. So it's another elevation. It's another foot higher, 2 foot higher, depending upon what your scale is. The dark lines are used to delineate usually like 10-foot runs at a time. So if you look real close, which is hard to see, but I'll try to zoom in some, it does show the approximate outline of the house. And these dark lines are, when topography lines are close together, they indicate a steeper slope. When they're real far apart like these, it indicates a flatter area. This little jog in this line closest to the house is what puts those steep slopes, in theory, up against the back of the house. That's what's in question. Now, as I was saying earlier, it wouldn't matter even if that line didn't jog towards the house because of the 50-foot expanded buffer. That 50-foot would drop us all the way back here, roughly. So we'd be, the majority, almost all of the house is within that 50-foot expanded buffer, the existing house. So this is this topography line, which I did add to the site plan. I put the highest one here and I labeled it. And if you look way back here, again, I apologize that there's a lot going on in this site plan, but this dashed line is the 50-foot buffer. So these, I didn't want to have too much chart junk, so I only showed the one most impacting, but that is where our environmental feature is. Now, having said that, I want to show for record that when I keep referring, and I'm looking at participants, it's still just a list. When I keep referring to real life, if you listen to the end of that question, it said whether or not those features were taken from mapped resources or were field delineated. Those are all mapped resources. If we go to the field delineated, if we show what's actually out there, get this to go away for a second. I want to zoom in on this. This is a quick picture of the rear of the property, where the deck is going. For clarity, I want to state that this bump out is existing, this porch area and bump out is existing, and the open deck is proposed to span between the two to connect them. And the open deck is not proposed to go any further in projection than what the existing structure currently does. And it should be noted that you can clearly see right here, we're not dropping 2, 5, 10 feet in slope. This has been graded previously when the house was constructed. There has not been any recent grading, and this slope is almost nil. I would call it roughly a 1% at best. The slope starts going downhill out here, where we're constructing on post and pier footings to add. The slope is not impacted at all. So I included both for this modification because I want to give all possible information. The feet are the mapped resources are on the plan. The field verified are on the construction plans. Good with that? Does that make sense?
Yes, that little mapped deal there is a draw. There's a little draw there, and it's just been filled in when they built the house up by the house, and but down below it continues on down to the water.
Gotcha. Yeah, which makes sense, and that's why it looks, in real life, flat where this deck is going.
Yeah.
But like I said, if we were just outside of the expanded buffer, maybe we would need to land engineer more detail of that so we could avoid this process. But because the 50-foot expanded buffer pushes us so far into even where the existing house is, we'd have to go through this anyway. So it really doesn't make much sense to argue it. We'll just show what really exists on photographs and show that we're not impacting the steep slopes. And I point out the post and pier footing because if this was a addition or anything on perimeter footing, like a concrete slab, you're doing much more impact to the ground. You have impervious surface that you're dealing with and a continuous turn down footing. Whereas post and pier, you're talking a 6x6 post that's sitting on a pier footing that's under the frost depth. So we'll actually get to a point of this that when they talk about mitigation, but it really won't even need mitigation, but we will offer to provide anything that they would recommend.
Yep.
All right, that's number 7. Number 8, location of forest, individual specimen trees, and priority forest areas. So let me share again. I have a couple of things here. You have to bear with me. When I show this, I have to wait for the Zoom thing at the top to go away so that I can see my options. Okay, this is actually a aerial map, albeit a rough one, that the county provided, just showing the flood plain, but I thought it was a good map to show that the amount of vegetation in this area is actually fairly extensive. This is not a large cleared lot by any means. There's a lot of vegetation, which greatly helps the impervious versus pervious surface conversation. If this were a slab on grade, I would almost guarantee that we shouldn't have to do replanting plan or pervious mitigation because of the amount that actually exists in the lot. Again, it's post and pier, but I just like to show how much this is one of those things that works really well in our favor, that there's a lot of vegetation in the area. This is one from, so even if that other one was older, this is one from recent Google Maps that shows the same thing. I mean, where that polygon of your lot goes, you have a good amount of trees on especially the part that goes back to Shady Lane. So
right.
It would be very not beneficial to show every tree on the site plan because you wouldn't probably see much of anything else.
Right.
All right. The rest of it, let me pull this down so I can keep watching for participants. We still are just the two of us because the rest of the next couple don't even apply to you. So number 9, description of any single lot residential projects. That's talking about if you were developing a single lot, developing a new residence on a single lot. This is an existing single lot. It is residential. It's a deck addition on the back or geographical front, however they want to look at it, of an existing single family dwelling. Number 9 or 10, description of proposed multi-unit lot residential projects, including, and then it goes A through I. It's not applicable because we're doing no multi-unit or multi-lot residential project. This is an existing lot again, and it's a existing single family dwelling. Number 11, description of proposed non-residential or mixed use projects, and it goes through A through N. Again, does not apply. It's not a non-residential nor mixed use. This is an existing residential lot. Number 12, for residential or mixed use projects, the impacted schools and whether or not they are open or closed. You got to remember the modification process is for everything. Mostly new neighborhoods or a set of lots that are going to go in near an environmentally sensitive area. That is not this project. However, I like to do my due diligence. So I do have schools. So we pulled up who the affected schools, which there's no effect by an open deck, but affected schools would be Botkin Elementary, Chesapeake Bay Middle, and Chesapeake High. Does that sound right to you? Because I got that directly from their website.
Yeah, I think Bodkin Elementary may actually be farther away than Lakeshore Elementary. but,
Okay, interesting.
They're close.
Okay, well, and both of those elementaries and the middle and high that are listed here are open, which is one of the things they ask, whether these schools are open or closed. But again, for record, I know that that's not what they really mean by this question because this is an open deck on the back of a house. So there's no affected schools. It will not increase any population density. You're not going to move anybody into your open deck, but we stated it for the record. All right, type of proposed water and sewer service. So there is well and septic on the property. I would argue that it's not proposed. It's existing, obviously. But for good measure, let's show that as well. I still have that on the site plan. If I can get to it. All right, here's the site plan, and may be hard to see for the camera, but I'll show it in blow up version. The well is off 25 feet off this corner. That's approximate, but it's probably pretty close. And the septic tank and distribution box are over here to the, what I would call the northeast side of the existing driveway. And there's going to be no change. And again, no impact. All right, so this one, number 14, it says proposed impact to each environmental feature and a list of modifications that will be required. That goes back to what we were already told, what modifications will be required. Again, we would say that there's no impact to the steep slopes because we're not in the steep slopes. We are in the buffer. So per section 17.6403 and 17.8201, which is the LDA, which actually, now that I see that, that's not a lowercase L because they capitalized the DA. So it's funny, they have IDA there, but it's not, it's LDA. IDA would actually be better for us. So we're actually being LDA, we're showing them that we actually have the more limited construction, but on post and pier footings, it should have zero impact on the steep slopes. And leading directly into number 15, it says any proposed mitigation to offset the impact to each environmental feature. There will be none. However, we would be more than happy if that is the stipulation to approval for both of the modification and the variance, that there needs to be some mitigation efforts. I would argue that it should not go anywhere. It doesn't need any, in my opinion. If they want any, we can do silt fencing to minimize any sort of slope disturbance. I can't imagine that they would request vegetation mitigation because there's a ton of vegetation on the property. But for the record, I would say that we would be amenable to any mitigation that they felt a post and pier footing would need to have from a 6x6 post. I think that they're going to find that it's going to be that we are not going to need any. All right, last two, list any other known modifications that are needed for the project. There are no other modifications, but I feel like that's a limiting question. I like, again, total disclosure. So as I left this up, you can see we do need a variance. It's not the nature of the question. It says that it wants to know if you need any other modifications. We don't, but we do need a variance, but it's for the same things. It's for the slope variance that we have and the buffer. As you see in that top box, it's going to be 18.13.104 and 18.4.401, which will be the variances. We're going through that process concurrently. We've already gotten the pre-application meeting done with the environmental section. We have pre-file comments already on that one, and we're just waiting through the process for this so that we can include any comments we receive from the 14-day comment period to the variance application, and then we'll move through that process. And last but not least, it says any other relevant information of note. I have none. There's a couple more things on the main checklist that we're getting ready to go through, but just to put a bow on this one, Mr. Hodgson, do you have any other thing that you want to include at this point?
There's nothing that I know of.
Good. Okay, we're good. So then let's return. That completes the checklist. Checking participants is still just the two of us. Sorry to keep saying that. So returning to the during the community meeting checklist, after we go through the whole checklist, it does want to see a vicinity map. So let me share that. I have that pulled up. Here. All right, so that's the vicinity map. I'll zoom in just so people get a bearing on the video. Here's Lakeshore Drive, which is a fairly decent landmark so that you get an idea where Eagle Hill and Shady Lane is. North Shore Road on this side, and this is off of Swan Cove, or actually Swan Cove is on this side. Is this body of water right behind you called anything different? Uh-oh, you muted.
I'm sorry, that's Black Hole Creek.
Okay, there you go. So, right, if you wanted the water side, I only like to throw that out there because, again, they technically consider the water side your front because you're waterfront. But
Okay.
Lakeshore or vicinity map, just to give a bearing as to where the project is. That's number 8. Number 9, if no stakeholders join the virtual community meeting, the virtual meeting still needs to proceed with a presentation of the project. Obviously, we've done that. This is still being recorded, so we'll have this posted online, and then they'll have, this will actually go to the county tomorrow, and then they'll get it posted online, and we will have a 14-day comment period. And then final one is number 10. If there's any technical difficulties or the inability to complete the delivery of the required information during the presentation, another community meeting must be held. We haven't had any. I'm going to return to participants just to make sure we're still just the 2 of us. And all of the back and forth on my screen, as I said at the beginning, I have the secondary recording that even if we had a technical difficulty, we were covered with a secondary. Beyond that, the last thing I like to typically do, just for the recording, that it doesn't ask for, is to make this smaller again. Oh, hold on 1 second. There it is. And just let the construction of the actual deck be shown. So I keep returning to where I say that it's post and pier construction for the foundation. This is the post and pier layout. So barring any field minor modifications, you're talking about a front beam, a back beam, and supporting that angle, obviously supporting the steps. And again, the steps are built within that footprint. This is the foundation plan. This is the framing plan. And it is an open deck with a railing side. This is not being enclosed or covered. Again, I just like to point that out, even though it doesn't ask, but that way it gives the recording or people the idea of what we're actually trying to do out there. Beyond that, I will still include in our argument that we're staying in line with the existing house. We're not going towards the slopes any further than the house already does. And a lot of that will come up at variance, but that concludes everything we really need to go through. Is there any questions you have for me or anything else that you want to throw out there? Oh, and you're muted.
Yeah, okay, hold on for just a second. My wife has a question.
Sure.
Okay, when you're explaining where the location of the deck is,
Uh-huh.
you say it's on the front of the house on the water side, and you're saying on the back of the house. But
That's
it's not, it's on the side of the house.
Okay, all right. So where the driveway, and I know what you mean. Let's clear that up right now. So let's go back to,
The
Yes.
back of our house is facing,
right. I know exactly what you mean. It only gets confusing because of the waterfront. So because they count the water side as your front yard, by sheer definition, it puts the opposite side, the water side, as your front or your rear yard, which I know is not the physical front. So what you're talking about is when you come in from this driveway here, this porch and this driveway are in your physical front of your house.
wait,
So this deck would be on the left side, and it just so happens that the water is also on the left side of your house,
Right.
correct?
Right.
Okay, so that's a good point to point out for clarity. I definitely breezed over that. I'm talking theoretical. So because this property line where the pier is considered the front property line, by definition, this line way over here, not even shown, like this one, when you're looking at the whole property, this over here is technically considered your rear, which I know is not your front.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
So, but physical front, it's a good point to point out that driveway enters here. I would assume without even seeing the house that this is probably a front load garage.
It is.
And this porch is where your front door is. So when you
Yes.
walk in this front door, the proposed deck will be on the left side, which is also the same side that the water is on.
yes.
That's correct.
Okay, perfect. I'm glad you brought that up. And that's a good point. So anything else that we should?
I don't have anything else.
And I'm back in participant screen and it's still the two of us. So next time, if we have a party or something, we got to get more invitations out to your neighbors. Got no one.
Yeah, I've talked to all my neighbors and they don't have a problem.
Awesome. Well, it seems like a perfect area of, like neighborhood wise that these get different or different. I don't want to say difficult, but different when there's a lot more people sitting on top of each other. And then maybe people have more questions, but open decks are usually very unobtrusive and they don't, especially to environmental features and it being an open deck and it being pervious. So we're not really messing with really anything. So this was the formality part. I'm going to stop the recording now unless you have any other questions.
No, I just wanted to point out that nobody can see it. And that's probably why there's nobody online.
That's a good point too.
It
Yeah.
it doesn't affect anyone.
Yep. And it's almost 100 feet. It's just under 100 feet from the shoreline. I mean, you're a good distance away. And the recording's still going, just for full disclosure. But the funny part, I don't want to say funny, we got to do everything we're supposed to do. But when we get to the variance portion, I kind of alluded to it earlier, but if you caught what I said, if you were a not waterfront house, your front yard where your front door is and your address side gets a sign to let all your neighbors know that you're going through a variance. Because you're a waterfront lot, they consider that sign needs to be on the water side that nobody's ever going to see. Then they're going to require another sign on the side where your street frontage is. So I need to clarify from them that really that should go as close to where you pull off to go to your driveway, even though the rear lot is all the way out on that, what I would call a pipe stem, all the way all the way up the top by River
Yeah,
Road. Or,
I agree. Nobody even really equates that location of our lot to our house.
and it's so treed or it's covered in vegetation. I mean, it would be hardly useful, but it's still the semantics that we have to go through. But I
Sure.
100% agree. This deck will not be an imposition. So hopefully it's continued to be viewed that way. And I do agree that I think I'm looking at the participant board still, and it's by my clock 6:40, and we are just the two of us. That clearly this is not an imposition that required anybody to spend their Wednesday night with us.
Right. Okay.
All right, let me go ahead and stop this.